So quickly, I want to first introduce Dr. Flavia Santos. She is a neuroscientist, an assistant professor, and an EdUHK fellow at the Faculty of Psychology at the University College of Dublin in Ireland. She's nominated as a research fellow at the Geary Institute for Public Policy and chair-elect for the Math, Cognition, and Learning Society. Her innovative translational research focuses on neurodevelopmental disorders and ways to support math performance through musical training and digital games. And her prolific scholarship in math cognition and math anxiety, and she is also an investigator of national grants in Ireland, Spain, Portugal, and Brazil. So Dr. Santos has translated her work to inform policy and practice through policy paper, courses on neurodevelopmental disorders, teacher workshops on math anxieties and game-based intervention, and keynote addresses at the international conferences. So how do I come to know Flavia? So I met Flavia at a Zoom talk on game-based learning at Math, Cognition, and Learning Society a couple years ago during the pandemic. I simply just suggested an idea for data analysis on her data set. And we follow up the conversation via email, and she generously shared her data set with me and invited me to write a paper with her, and that's how we started our collaboration. After that, she invited me to another paper, and then even invited me to join a cross-cultural collaboration with her student working on numerical cognition. So just in the short past 2.5 years, we already have 2 papers working together, a registered report, and several conference symposium for an International Society for Learning Sciences and Math, Cognition, and Learning Societies. And she's the one who showed me that people are kind and don't be shy to reach out. And just simply reaching out and sharing some ideas can lead to really fruitful and productive collaborations and relationships. So for today, I want this to be kind of a little bit informal conversation, just trying to ask Flavia some questions to share her journey and experience for us to learn. And then so I prepared some questions to ask her, but I know that some of you already submitted some questions and have some questions in mind that you want to ask. So we'll definitely leave some time for you all to ask those questions. And then so please don't be shy here. So we'll start with a couple of questions on Flavia's background. So tell us about your story and how you get started to become a researcher.
So first of all, thank you so much for this wonderful introduction, very, very kind. And I also think that you put a lot of pressure on me because all people are with huge expectations. So my pleasure to talk to you and to you all this afternoon. Well, you want to know about my research, right? So that's a long story. But I definitely started interested in memory, working memory, and I started doing my PhD in this area. Then my PhD was supposed to be just a behavioral study, and then in the middle of the process, I convinced my supervisor that it should be a neuroimaging study. And in the middle of the process, I convinced my supervisor that I should be abroad. So I started with very small and become an international exchange. So I went to Dublin University in the UK, and it was just amazing, really, really great.
And so what led you to study psychology and the research topics that you worked on?
Psychology was very interesting because when I was 16, I haven't yet decided which career I was going to pursue. Then there was in my school vocational program, so I went, attended the sessions, and they were doing lots of activities. And it was very interesting because at the end they used one of those vocational tests, and the person who was discussing with me showed me several possibilities. For instance, to be a translator, for instance, to work in the field of law. And but turns out that if you think about it, I use all those skills nowadays, because if you are writing a grant, you need to know about the policies, about the laws, about the regulations. As a researcher, you need to speak different languages, like English is not my first language. So anyways, was helpful. But when she asked me, what do you think about those options I'm giving to you? I said, me? I'm going to be a psychologist. And she looked at me like, what? I said, yes, I want to do what you are doing. I want to influence people. I want to understand how people is thinking, what is in their minds, and how they make their best choices in life, and so on. So that was the story about choosing psychology. Then regarding specific field, I think like many students, when you are very young, you are watching movies and you think that, okay, I saw that stereotyped professional on the movie, so maybe I would like to do psychoanalysis. That was my thinking before learning the theory. But when I went to the university, I started to, of course, getting more contact with the biological modules, which are the ones that I really like and understand better, like neurophysiology, neuroanatomy, biochemistry, and so on. So based on that, it was clear to me that the theory that was speaking to my heart was neuroscience, and then I moved to this direction.
Yes. And then so, I know that you've been working in the field and on like neuroscience and math learning and musical training and game-based learning for the past a few decades. And then so how did you build your research program over time?
Yes, I think we need to be very honest. It's not necessarily the pathway that you are dreaming of or expecting. You really need to deal with what is happening in real world. So that's one aspect. But yes, I think the kind of training I received doing my PhD was extremely influential. It was a department of psychobiology. So because of that, I had at the same time someone working with mice, someone working with children or with older adults. They could be dealing with the very same subject, like depression, but with absolutely different approaches, methods, analysis, theories, and that makes your mind see things in a different way. So definitely it was influential. Also the fact that because it is a psychobiology department, was and is still a psychobiology department, you definitely need to have interdisciplinary work and interdisciplinary teams. So based on all of this, I definitely see myself as a translational researcher. So I always like to work in collaboration with other researchers from different fields and connecting different methods, because I think that's the best way to go. But always, if possible, keeping the neuroscience in the process, so understanding brain mechanisms, brain development, how it influences the way we behave, the way we can act or learn.
Nice. And I think like in your response, you talked a little bit about all these different fields and experience that you had through your training and from your department. And I know that being a researcher in academia, a lot of times translational research is very hard for us. It's not really intuitive in thinking about how do we talk about our research in a kind of a publicly accessible way, and how to communicate our research in an impactful way that influence policy and practice, right? So do you have any advice on conducting translational research, or what can we do to move closer to having influences and impacts on the world?
Yes, I think this is a huge problem. I don't see all degrees preparing people to write policy papers or to speak with policymakers. We don't get this kind of training in some specific areas, in some specific countries perhaps. We also don't see it as something natural in that the government invites a researcher to be there and give their opinion. It's some places you might see it, but it's rare, still rare. So I definitely think it should change, starting from changing the curriculum. I think that's crucial. Maybe we should do a paper about it, a policy paper about it. But I also think that we need to really to make an effort, so make of it an habit. So starting to really say, okay, I'm doing this research. So one output obviously will be a scientific article, but the other output must be outreach in a way that the children and the parents that are collaborating will be having access to this. But also we need to think, okay, another output must be for policymakers. So it could be a paper, could be maybe organizing an event in which you can meet and invite those individuals. And I think writing for policymakers is also something different from other things, because yes, it must be very brief, because they do not have the time, right? It must be very straightforward to what is the problem, like headlines, you just, like I started my talk last week, 670 million kids across the globe are not achieving the level of maths or reading in the world. So this is big news and very important. So you need to speak with them with strong numbers, clear numbers, what's the impact, and also you need to tell them the costs related to the potential changes they need to do. You need to talk to them about what are the agents, like governmental and non-governmental individuals that will play a role to make the changes you are planning and you are trying to do. Because otherwise they will not get involved or interested and make any effort to change it. So it's really important we need to guide them somehow.
I guess I need to go make some friends with policymakers. But I think even just really simple steps that we can get started. While you were talking, it reminds me of a habit that my advisor was trying to get me into. So for a couple of papers that we published, we actually tried to write up a follow-up blog based on the papers. So what can we tell parents to inform their practice? What kind of example can we give them? So maybe I really need to get back to that habit. So I know that you've worked in a very interdisciplinary field, combining neuroscience with psychology and music and games and digital interventions. And then and throughout the years, you also have collaborators around the world. So how did you establish, maintain, and even grow those international and interdisciplinary collaborations?
Well, establish is something, let's say, the easiest part, but maintain is something else. So establish is really this. You go to a conference and you talk to people there. You send an email for an author when you read their paper, and I think that's the way to start. But also you need to follow up sometimes. Everybody's busy, everybody's doing many things. So sometimes if you just not keep going or knocking again at the same door, maybe it's not possible to progress. So I think that's important. I think as a researcher you need to be constant as well. So sometimes people have different moods and they show their moods in the contact with other individuals, and it could be very detrimental if you're aggressive, or if there's some form of harassment. Of course, you never talk to that person again or never recommend that person again. So the way we behave is very important to keep the relationships. In terms of the work done, I think it's very important to consider the quality of what you're doing. So if you start a collaboration but you do not progress, if you miss the deadline, if you do not apologize for something that eventually you did, even unintentionally by mistake, something that, I don't know, somehow disrupted the project. So you need to be very honest, and when you are overwhelmed and you cannot do things, you need to tell the person, listen, I will not be able to finish this month. Can we reschedule? Can we plan another deadline and organize things? But if you just disappear, then you are losing a connection for the rest of your life. And I also see that those connections, they are not just for that particular project you are doing. you think it's okay, it's just this article here. No, turns out that this person knows someone else, that knows someone else, that knows someone else. And in the future, I've seen this happening to me many times, that I was introduced by one person and the other friend was there, and that allowed us to start a new collaboration, a new publication, a new grant application. So connections are for everything. And also, if you need a person to write a letter about your work, if you need this person in the future, sometimes you don't know, might be a reviewer in some circumstances, maybe not of your own work, because of course you have conflict of interests, the person will decline, but sometimes it's a paper of a student of yours and you don't know, it's anonymous, right? So could happen. And then I think it's important to really build a reputation, keep that perspective, keep that attitude, and like plants, we need to keep taking care of them from time to time, and I think that's important. And the interpersonal aspect is crucial, so be real. I don't think we need to see the other researcher as a professional connection all the time, to be responsible in that sense, but we also need to find in that person a friend, which is something important, because it even makes your connection stronger, so I think that's important.
And I can definitely attest all the things that Flavia has said. She is a wonderful collaborator for all the papers that we've been working on. She's very consistent in providing really thoughtful feedback and edits on our papers, and really honest in trying to get me to be really honest too, in asking me, do you want to do this? There's an option here, you can say no. And then so it is really nice to have that open communication with your collaborator. And so I really appreciate how well you've been able to kind of maintain and grow all these different connections. And it's just a treat to work with you and a treat to be a part of your network.
Well, that's mutual.
Thank you.
Definitely mutual.
Now, thinking about your careers over time and the trajectories, like, are there any pivotal moments or events or people that have greatly influenced your research or your career?
I think I do have some pivotal moments and pivotal people, but I want to say something else first. Pivotal is every single day. Because it's not the day, like today we have a ceremony that some colleagues will receive a prize or award, I don't know exactly how to frame it here, but they will receive an award today. But it's because of what they did before, so that's every day what will create this level of development in your career. So pivotal is every day. So be mindful, be thoughtful, be considered in everything you are doing, because it will always have a consequence. So I think that's crucial. Now thinking about people, definitely my supervisor, very, very dear Professor Orlando Bueno. He's no longer with us, but it was a person that believed in me since the first moment. He was convinced in our first meeting, because I think it's worth mentioning. I arrived in, well, first of all, I knocked his door, literally. Then I said, no, I'm leaving, and I left. Then I came back another day. I did like this, said, should I? Oh my God, should I? I will, and then I did. And then she said, come in, and I entered, and it was exactly like this. I was with my bag, I put the bag on the chair, and I said, tell me what you want, what brings you here. And then I said, oh, I would like to do research. I was thinking about a master at that point. And his first sentence was, well, I'm afraid I don't have any position available right now. I was already taking my bag to leave immediately, you know, kind of, oh, okay, no, it's not for me. And then he said, no, tell me what you have in mind. And I did. And I could see his eyes like shining like this. And he said, well, I think you should start attending some classes here on voluntary basis. And there will be the next period in which we'll be selecting individuals, and you can apply for that selection process. And that's how it started. So I think the courage to do that is very important, and the way he was welcoming my contribution was very important. As a pivotal moment, I would also consider when I did my international exchange during my PhD. So I went to Durham University. I worked with Professor Susan Gathercole, which is still the top name in working memory, especially in pediatric research. She's nowadays in Cambridge, but she was at Durham University at the time. And that was really a watershed because, of course, I was abroad, first time alone, first time in a different culture. I had the opportunity to meet all the researchers in this field, the main researchers, in a few events organized in that period. Even the experience of going to the library. You know, all those papers that nowadays for you is very easy, just click on internet and download it. But at that time, when we needed a paper, you had to send a letter, not an email, a letter for the researcher asking for a copy, because most developing countries don't have free access to all the papers. Nowadays, of course, it's different, but at that time it was like this. And so when you go to the library and you see the volume there and say, wow, it was so difficult for me to get access, and it's just like this. You just go there and pick up and print it and so on. So it was really, really amazing. And I think it was really preparing me for all that came afterwards. It was really important. And then I would put two last pivotal moments. One was definitely when I became an Ad-Astra Fellow at the University College Dublin, which was in 2019. It was a competition in which we had 2,700 CVs, 100 interviews, and 65 positions. So one is mine. So that was really meaningful. Thank you. And I must add that I was competing with people from all fields: medicine, physics, psychology. So it was really, really important. I think it gives you a different sense. We all feel like imposters in our field, but in the moment you achieve something like that, you start to believe in yourself more. So it was very important. And I also think that since I'm there, many other doors has been open to me, and including that last week I was at addressing the plenary of the European Commission to present about game-based learning and my perspective on this area. And more importantly, I'm here, I'm a visiting scholar at this amazing university. So, but again, bear in mind, it never starts when you are there, it starts before. So like Jenny was saying, thanks to these 2 wonderful years and a half that we are collaborating, I'm here today. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much for this.
First, of course, thank you. And thank you for making time in your crazy busy schedule. I know you've been having a exciting year to make time to be here with us. And so I know that you mentioned quite a bit about like working in these various different countries and in various different departments and fields. And then so I want to know a little bit more about what brought you from Brazil, working on psychology, and then pediatric and neurology in UK, and then also to Spain and Portugal, and then Ireland.
Yes, well, of course I came to Europe because I got married. So yes, I have a personal life too. Yes, sometimes. So yes, I 2013 I got married, and so I moved to Europe. Let's say officially, my home officially is Spain, my heart, of course. So yes. So Fred understands me well. Yes. So yes, but then of course I had a stable position in Brazil. I had a tenure position in Brazil as a professor there. So it was a really hard thing to abandon a very stable career. I was known by everybody there, had my books published there already. So it was really, let's say, a hard thing to do. I had my own apartment, I had everything, my entire life built on my city. So when I came to Europe, I had to start again, and that's explained my position nowadays. Some places are a choice, like Spain was something that I really want to do because, of course, my husband is from there, so definitely was important for me to go and work in Spain. And then I applied for the job in Ireland and I was selected, and I found that it was a perfect place for me to work, considering the language, considering the development in the field, the opportunities for progressing research, so it was very important to do this transition. But I want you to understand that it happens to all of us. If you need to go abroad, you need sometimes to make some pathways that are not straightforward, because you need to also balance with other needs. So for me, it was very important to be in Spain, at least try to work there. And so that's why it was in this direction.
And I think throughout all these stories, I think one thing that I'm hearing is really, it takes a lot of courage from like knocking on your professor's door in the beginning, and then take also courage to also like uproot what you already have and established in Brazil, and then move to Spain for family, and then also move around. But I think there are also a lot of experience and a lot of gains that you made throughout all these exciting moments and experience. So now thinking about reflecting on your career and your research, what lessons have you learned throughout your career, and what will be helpful for others to learn from?
So many things. I think one very important is to be flexible. Okay, so if you're not flexible, you will not survive. It's the way academia is, it's the way all the situation is. Like you are going to a different country, it's a different culture, it's different language, different values, different way to conduct research. So you really need to learn the way, the place you are, embrace, really embrace it. But also can bring something from you and from your previous experience, and that's what makes so rich, the experience so rich. So I think that's one of the aspects. I also want to say, especially because we have early career here, I think another thing that you need to be very honest about is sometimes you find amazing places, memorable places that you would like to come back, but there are some places, if they are toxic, you shouldn't stay. And that's something very hard to say. Sometimes if it's a toxic place, you shouldn't stay, even if you believe that you cannot finish something, because you need also to respect yourself, to give value to yourself. And this is perhaps the most difficult thing to do in a career. Sometimes is to say, this place is not for me, and I deserve better. And do it for yourself, please, because this is really important. So I think this is one of the messages that I believe is very important to say sometimes.
Great. So be flexible,
Yes.
and also know when to leave, and when to find better and other opportunities. So now now we talked quite a bit about the past, now let's think about future. So what other advice do you have for graduate students and junior faculty members in terms of, like, because I feel like as we just first started, the field is like really wide open. We don't really know what to work on or how to decide what to work on. And what advice should we value versus what advice should we ignore? So do you have any thoughts on these questions on the topic or work that we should do, and then how should we do it, or what advice should we listen versus ignore?
Yes, that's tricky because first of all, when we are doing the PhD, usually you might have some exceptions, but usually the person has not yet a clear idea about research. So following what the supervisor suggests is the easiest way, but at the same time, you cannot call it yours because it's from your supervisor. Sometimes you don't see ahead why is this important. So I think you can use the PhD time as a learning period rather than, oh, I'm defining myself in this moment. When you finish your PhD, then you will start to be able to say, oh, I really like this technique, I don't like to work in this field, or I don't like this kind of things, or I'm curious about something else. And then in the postdoctoral period, I think it's when you are ready to actually choose something that will distinguish you from other researchers. So don't be worried about it, because I know that's very normal. When you finish your PhD, everybody asks you to talk about your PhD. And you say, no, I want to go in a different... It was not my case, but sometimes it is. And the person said, I want to go in a different direction. And so you can start working on it. Sometimes we need to do also understand when you get your first job, you must do what the job requires from you, not exactly what you want. So that's really tricky. So I would say be faithful to what you are interested in that sense. But sometimes you might need to make what you really like as a hobby rather than the main topic. We also have this situation, especially assistant professors. You must supervise what appears, and sometimes it's not related to your topic. I remember one situation, we at the UCD, we do a presentation first, so there's a day that you present all the projects, and it was very clear, the name of my lab is UCD Music and Math Cognition. Very clear, right? And the student came and said, I want to study something related to human resources, I want to know career... So yes, that's the way it is, and you need to adapt, you know, so sometimes you need to adapt. Yeah, it's really hard. In some cases, you manage to say, okay, we are going to do what you want, but we will add something else. But sometimes it's really, really not compatible, and it's not even, you cannot avoid it. You need to help this student anyways, because it's also their career, their moment, and so it's important. So that's why I'm saying, even if you need to keep your interest as a hobby, keep there. And another thing that I would say, especially for the assistant professors or equivalent, you must brand yourself. So in all the places you have the opportunity, make it clear, I'm interested in numerical cognition, I'm interested in math anxiety, I'm interested in music science. So even if someone invites me for something else, it's there. So other people will know that I do that other thing too. You know, so I think that's important to keep clear what is in your interest. And even if you need to, I don't know, if you need to write 3 articles per year or 5 articles per year, I don't know what is the standard here, make sure that at least one of them is really about what you are interested, because then you go step by step progressing in this area and making it happen.
And just a plug-in, I'm sure we'll get to talk a lot more about this, like branding, social media, collaboration, and building your own research on next Tuesday at 2 p.m. So there's a workshop. I know Gigi has sent out emails about that, and I'll also send out reminders. So please do come. There are a lot of great questions that we may all ask ourselves about our career and what to do, and Flavia will answer those questions or help us think through those questions. One final question, and I guess we can open it up to others. As I know, many of us here are educational researchers, and I know your research is interdisciplinary but has a lot of implications for education. So what do you think are the current and future directions for research, and what or how should we work on our work and research?
Yes, first of all, I think it's, at this stage of the work, it's almost impossible to say what is the next step. Maybe individuals on meta science can tell us more about it. And I'm saying this not like, oh, I have no idea. No, it's not in that sense. It's considering that the children we are assessing today in our projects will become adults with professions that, for the moment, they even exist. So we don't know what are the future demands yet. They are changing very fast, and we need to keep up with this pace. So what I see that is something that I believe will remain for a while at least is the issue of technology. So any kind of research that is connected to the issue of technology might be important for us as a field of research. And I would say as well, early education, because more and more we are seeing that, especially neurodevelopmental disorders, they can be detected, diagnosed earlier, but they aren't precisely because we are not paying attention on preschoolers or even younger than this. We are just seeing them when they are in the first grade, second grade, and start to fail. So I think we need to pay more attention to early education, not just because of that, but because these are the future human beings, and we want to have a society that's not just with excellent technologically prepared individuals, but also excellent human beings. And I think that's something to care about as a society. It's our duty to help and contribute for this to happen.
Great. So I've asked a lot of questions. I know many of you will also have questions that you can share and ask. And then so I'll open it up now for the last 20 minutes. Of course, I have more questions that I can keep talking, but I want to give you all opportunity to ask the questions that you want to ask. So please feel free. We can open it up to like a group discussion and conversation.
Actually, during the process, I was thinking like, oh, I have to ask like what advice you would give to like graduate students, but now I already like gained a lot of advice from you, like being flexible, and also PhD is a learning process, and also going to conferences to build network, which is very similar to my supervisor's advice. So So I noticed that you are doing some research on like music science, and my major is also connected to music education. So I wanted to ask like could you share a little bit about what research like you are currently working on or you worked before that is related to music science, and like what are there any interesting findings?
Thank you so much for your question. Yes, one thing I would say about music science is a question of principle for me. I don't like to carry out research in music science if I don't have a musician with me. So I think that's, let's say, a precondition. So that's why I have less studies in this area, although I love it, because we need to find those connections. Some studies we did, we worked with musical training in preschoolers to see if it could help them to improve their learning in mathematics, and it did. It's just my favorite study that I would like to replicate and that I would like to expand. I just know that for doing an RCT study is very complex, it's a huge logistics, it's extremely expensive. It's hard to do this kind of research. So that's why I didn't continue, but that's one of the studies that I found the most important. The only time I replicated was with children with developmental dyscalculia, and it worked. The children improved in some specific skills after the musical training, so definitely that's something that I'm interested in. There is one of the studies we carried out in Dublin recently that is not published yet, but we have the paper. It's my fault. I need to finish the reading to submit. It's ready, the paper. I just need to review it, which is about, I love it. It's we did an interview with musicians to see their anxiety before performing publicly, and it was very interesting to understand their experiences. It is a taboo topic. Musicians, they do not find people to talk with about it, so it's a huge problem. There is also the issue like some musicians will use some drugs, so it's a very important topic, so I'm looking forward to submit this paper. We also did another one, which is something that I'm very interested in, is this more experimental aspect. So what we did is to measure the emotions related to listening to music. So we had different episodes of songs, and we used physiological measures, so we could see how long the person was under the influence of the music, and also what kind of responses they gave. And it was very interesting to see that the cognitive response not necessarily match to the physiological. So I believe there is a lot of bias because you are expecting, okay, you are putting a sad song, so I expect that you will say that you are sad, or so you answer that, but not necessarily it will lead you to be emotionally sad, or kind of provoke real physiological changes in your responses. So I'm very interested in those topics, and definitely I would like to continue, but again, you need to have a lab. Now we do have some resources in our lab, so we potentially will continue to do more physiological studies, but we'll see, depending on the students that appear that must be interested in this topic. Oh, we also did some smaller ones, undergraduate projects in which we used like performing maths tasks while you're listening to music or without listening to music. Another student this year did something interesting, which was to listening sounds, not necessarily music, but sounds, which were congruent or incongruent with the text they were reading. So it was like listening sounds of the sea, the ocean, and the text was about, I don't know, agriculture, or vice versa, the text about really the sea and everything. So it was very interesting. Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much, Flavia, for your time, and I think I'm very sure that this has been very eye-opening for some of my students and colleagues and everybody. It's so nice of you to organize all of this, Jenny. So I have two questions, right? One related to the student, right? For many of the students here, or in any other institution, I think kind of the dream is to, I graduate here in Hong Kong, and then I get a job in Hong Kong, and I stay in Hong Kong, and don't leave Hong Kong. What would you say? Or in Spain, and I don't leave my department in Spain. This is very common, right? So, from personally you with experience in so many different countries, what would you say is the sort of the added value of a scholar who has been moving around and experiencing so many countries? What would you say to people like these guys here who are going to graduate hopefully very soon, and then they will have the choice of staying in their cities or going overseas? That's question number one. And question number two, is more for me kind of thing. Like, I do see completely the value of collaborating with other people. I also do the same as you. I have research in many different topics, and I also have interest in different areas. And in the end, I end up publishing in areas that others may see sometimes as disconnected. And then when you apply for a promotion, they will tell you, hey, what is your research about? You have to say, well, I have different lines of research open because I'm interested in different things. And some people sometimes roll their eyes, especially, Americans, and they see like scholarship, like you just must do one thing, and that's the one thing you do. What do you say, how do you define yourself as a scholar? And I do agree 100% with you, and I have the same approach. I collaborate on different topics that some may see as disconnected. Of course, I see the connection, but the connection is I am interested in all of these things. Plus, I do see some connection, right? But I don't know if this is really a question of like, how have you dealt with these things when you present yourself as a researcher? How do you position yourself as a researcher with multiple interests? How do you deal with these things?
Yes, thank you. Very nice points. So for the first question about going abroad, I totally encourage this. I understand that there are individual differences. I know that there are economical reasons that sometimes could be a barrier for going abroad. I know that language is another barrier, but I also think that it is possible, if you can go, you should go, because seeing the world is being a different and a better person in many ways. You know, you get other senses, other tastes, other thoughts, other views. So it's really, really enriching for you as a person, as a human being, but also as a researcher. Definitely, I would go as many places as I could. I went for some that I was not so, that was not my first choice, but I definitely would encourage people to go. And in any place you go, you always will learn something. Trust me, you always learn. Even to learn that this is not the model I want to follow, but it is something important to learn. And also because in the future, if you approach a place that is similar, you detect very early and say, okay, not here, not for me, I'm leaving. So it's very important for you to see different places. So if you can go abroad, if you have the financial or the educational conditions, do it. It's really enriching, definitely. Now about your question, I think that's I'm reaching an interesting point in which I simply don't care. So you say whatever you want, it's my life, my career, and I do what I want to do. So I know that it depends to reach this point. It takes time, I know. But I recently, I'm seeing this as an extremely advantage. Because I've been in a situation that's almost hilarious, because the person said, I heard about one circumstance recently that the person was saying, I need someone that could talk about neuroscience. I need someone that could talk about developmental psychology. I need someone that could do, I don't know, experimental research. And then I was fitting all things that they were looking for. So I think that becomes your power, not your weaknesses. And I think it's also the way you frame it. So like my CV, when I put the publications, I have sections. So only working memory, and I put there my list of papers, only numerical cognition. And then you put things very clearly organized, and I think that's okay. And again, really depends on where you are. Like in the United States, my connections are related to rehabilitation, to neuropsychology, not even neuroscience, pure neuroscience, is rehabilitation. So there I'm even talking about older adults, about those issues. But when I'm interested in numerical cognition, I can just label, and I try to label in this way because that's the area I'm trying to develop now. But if someone that comes from a previous time and say, hey, I know that you know working memory. Would you like to do something with this, or can you help me with this? So why not? I know, and I think that's very beneficial. And I know as well that in terms of promotion, what counts is the quality of the paper, the impact factor, and the amount of papers you have. So if you can have in different areas, I don't see it as a problem. So just frame it very positively as a strength, because it is. Okay.
Thanks. Thanks everyone, and also thanks Dr. Santos. And I'm Dan from the ECE department also, and my background is ECE and early childhood education. But now I'm also doing some neuroscience for exploring the early experience in childhood and its impact on children's development and also their achievement, like the academic achievements and also others. So I'm curious about what do you think it is a good way to apply the neuroscience technology in very young children's research? Yeah, please.
That's a wonderful question, and really nice the field of research you are involved in as well. So yes, we have issues with ethics. So especially in Ireland, you cannot you cannot even go to a school if you don't have what they call guarda vetting, which is you need to send your information to the police and everything. So we do have more careful approach when we are doing research with children. So the access is difficult, and I think we need to be very careful on how we do it. So first of all, I think explain for parents clearly what is the study. Sometimes explain to them the hard part, which is, well, what I'm doing will help possibly future kids, but not necessarily yours, because it's not treatment, right? It's just an investigation to see how the brain works or how it works. So I think we have this moral and ethical responsibility to be very clear with parents. We also need to be mindful about the children rights. So if the child says, no, I don't want to, it's no, and that's all. You can ask, or you can even say, listen, if you change your mind, you please let me know. Of course, we are desperate that they will change their minds, but we cannot force them to do things. So I think respecting this is very important. And then we also need to be very mindful about the impact, because some of the technologies, especially transcranial brain stimulation and other related areas, we don't know exactly what is the impact. We don't have 100% certainty about the electrical currency, or how many moments you can use it, or what's the intensity. You need to be careful about it. Of course, there are researchers specialized to try to identify it, so it's being done. It's being treated, this issue, this matter, but we don't have yet 100% sure. So we need to be very careful on how many times and the intensity that we are using, and then the number of individuals that we are involved in this. So I think it's very important to offer a very good follow-up for the family, in the sense that, okay, sometimes you finish your project in 24 hours, right? It's just a single session and you think, oh, that's fine. But you need to follow up with parents to see, like a month later, do you see any signs and symptoms and complaints? Also, it's not standardized to have questionnaires about side effects. Like, you need to ask, did you have headache? Did you have any other uncomfortable feeling? Any strange sensation? What happened after that? So we need to be very careful about those things and ask a lot, and work with statistics and make sure that we are using the right sample size, because it's also disrespectful to invest the time, use government money, and then, oh, it was not conclusive. Yes, because you did the wrong sample size. So it's very important to be careful about those issues. I think they are worth, and there are some techniques that are absolutely non-invasive, like magnetic-to-brain cephalography, that could be used and without causing harm for the kids. So I think we should use those approaches if we can. But again, depending on the lab, you don't have those resources available. So if you do have, please go ahead, because I think it's a very exciting and important area as well. That'd be wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Santos. And actually, I agree with you very much. And I know that it is very important to explain to the parents and also give the rights back to the children. And actually, I'm using the FNIS. So yes, you know that FNIS is no harm and very easy to use. However, compared with fMRI, as you may know, it may have more limitations in the research design and other things. So do you think it is a good way to limit it to the technology level and then just see what we can do by that, and then we wait for another time for the technology developments? Maybe we prepare for the basic level and then not aim too much and use that to prepare for the future exploration. Do you think it is also a way worthy to do? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a very thoughtful way to see this. But also, I believe that you only will have the right technology by testing the ones you have now. So I think it's almost you cannot dissociate those things. So I would say very careful use of what you have. I was not discussing the difference between techniques. I know that even if you consider physiological ones and neuroimaging other ones, they are different. They offer different resources. So you need to use what you have, use wisely, of course. And yes, sometimes you cannot progress in that particular study, but maybe in a future study you can use something else. But not necessarily just sit down and wait, because we don't know when the new technology will be available. So we need to do our best with what we have right now. So yes.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Flavia, for your wonderful sharing. I've learned a lot. My name is Jerry. I'm now a PhD student from the department. So I was told many times about the importance of connection, and you have also mentioned this important. But as a PhD student, sometimes when I approach the professor, I have this kind of internal fear, like I'm approaching a top person in the field, whether he would like to talk with me, something like that. For example, if it's like a visiting professor, I would feel more comfortable because we have this kind of connection, right? But if a total stranger, like I'm going to a conference, should I talk? But I would like to talk. How would you recommend me to deal with this type of fear?
Oh, that's very nice to say, and I think it's very good that you brought this up. I would say what I did, no, it's not a formula, but I think you can, if you know that you are going to a conference in 3 months' time, and you know that is there the most important researcher in your field that you really should talk to that person. I think you can, now that you know 3 months before, send an email saying, introducing yourself, introducing your supervisor as always, and you can copy the supervisor just in case if you want, but it's not mandatory. And then you can put there a few lines, very short message because everybody's very busy. I'm not saying to big letter, a small letter in which you introduce yourself, tell your interest, and communicate that you are going to the conference, and if this person would feels like possible to meet. But not just say, I want to meet. Be clear why, what you need from them. Are you considering, for instance, to do a visit to their lab? Are you considering to do a collaboration? So be explicit of what you want from them, because based on that, they will make a decision and make the time. And usually they will say at least, oh, on the coffee break, reach me out and we can chat a little bit. And if it's something more specific, like if you're saying that you are going for a visit, then perhaps the person can make a time like 30 minutes or 20 minutes to meet you, especially to talk to you or something that might be relevant. I think if you show that your interest is more than curiosity, you know, if you have really a purpose on this contact, the person will definitely be more keen to welcome you, I think so. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. And but even if you don't do it, if you feel like talking to the person, just go there and talk. We are human beings, we are normal people, you know, and that's the way to go. Don't be shy, just don't be shy.
So thank you all so much for coming, and see you next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jenny.